Diarmuid, things have been fairly eventful since we last caught up. I suppose none more so than the Dubs. I suppose we can chat in a wee while about what they did last weekend in Salt Hill. But I suppose the aftermath of the defeat to Meath, if you can put yourself back in the player's position, if you're coming off the back of that there, what would your thoughts be in terms of as a player, how you would felt in that situation? And then secondly in that there, who would be the main drivers within that group that would have then been able to hold the thing together, not get sidetracked by that defeat, and then still have the mental resolve to pull out the performance that they did last weekend in Salt Hill?
Yeah, look, it's been well documented, Dublin's kind of demise over the last maybe half a decade. Like big players like Fenton, Mannion this year, Jack this year going away, Stephen coming back, even a lot of our group going away, James McCarthy, like the whole midfield had changed over that kind of 2 or 3 year period. They went down to Wicklow early in the championship this year and really struggled for long periods. Dessie Farrell came out afterwards and said, look, we've a lot of injuries, the squad isn't probably where it should be at the moment, and then we seen that against Meath. Meath came out and they bossed the midfield, and I suppose as a player looking at that, you want a reaction, that's all you want. And they had a big gap because obviously they didn't get to a Leinster final this year. They had a big gap to play in the first round of that championship, and what we seen then last Saturday was that reaction. And that's all you want as a manager, as a player, as a dressing room, is all you want to see is, can we compete again? And like you seen it on Saturday against Galway, who were the big players that stood up? The Sean Buglers, Kieran Kilkenny, making dispossessions against their big men. Kilkenny coming down the line and taking the ball off Shane Walsh, 2 or 3 points in the game, and the crowd lifts. And also we had something off the bench as well, I think, with them guys coming back and starting, it meant that we had a little bit of action coming off the bench, and I think that was something we missed maybe in the Leinster Championship this year and throughout the league because they didn't have the squad. But it looks to me like they're starting to build something. I like McGuinness had a great game on Saturday. Young Lorcan O'Dell was very active in the forward line. Yes, we can talk about Conor Callaghan, he's going to give you that 9 out of 10 most days. But a big one for me then was full-back Theo Clancy. Like, he was up against it for a lot of the game, but when the chips were down, he was the guy that stood up. And a lot of positives for Dublin to take. It's one performance, all year pretty much, so we won't be getting carried away, I'd imagine, but a good reaction to that Leinster campaign.
Yeah, like I suppose if you're looking from the outside in, there was a bit of lethargy to their second half against Galway here, where they were in control last year, and once that Galway surge came, unusual for that Dublin group, they didn't respond. You lose the experience, you lose the quality, but I would have to say it's how they reacted at the weekend, obviously led by the key players, Kilkenny, Con, etc. But it was those, I suppose, newer players who were finding their feet, who rode right in behind them, and then whenever it looked like Galway had clawed it back again or might do enough to see it over the lane, they come up trumps. Lahif finds himself in a pocket of space, clips a good score, and
probably the least expecting to clip that winner. But yeah, look, we also know Galway are probably below par. Like a lot of their big players probably didn't have the performance that they were looking for. So we can't kind of take, like, yeah, Dublin did get the win. It was a 1 point win right at the death. Look, Galway were probably, and probably still are in my mind, favourites for the All-Ireland this year. They have that squad depth to do that. Dublin, this is a one-off. They went to Salt Hill with a plan. They did a long time to come up with that plan to beat this Galway side and get themselves right into a position where they can do that. So yeah, big performance, but still a lot to learn on the road, I think.
The next big one for them then will be Armagh in Croke Park here in 2 weeks' time. Where do you see Dublin heading into that one? Building on what went well for them, or do you see any sort of tweaks or changes that they may have to make in terms of obviously a different opposition, maybe a slightly different style of play?
Well, look, I think we seen against Galway that they got their matchups pretty strong. They didn't let the key players like Paul Connolly was taken off early into the second half. Now he might have been carrying a knock, but they probably went after him every time he got the ball. They had a double team on him. Same with the likes of McDade on Saturday. Same with Shane Walsh. When they got the ball, they weren't let to take the toe tap or the solo and go by a man or make stuff happen. I think Armagh are going to pose a completely different set of challenges for this Dublin side. Galway played really nice football. They're not maybe as in your face as Armagh. This Dublin side are probably not privy to that northern style of football where it's real aggressive, in your face, swashbuckling, chaos. And Dublin like to kind of control the ball. Kilkenny, you know, when he gets on, he likes to, you know, slow it down and make things happen. But I think it's going to be a little bit different against Armagh. They're going to have to come out and play toe to toe. And you could see a real high scoring game, real exciting game. But I just don't know whether Dublin have, like, yeah, they've won good performance in them against Galway, but have they got that back-to-back performance? And that's what, you know, Dessie Farrell's going to look at the squad now this week and next week and say, you know, who have we got? Like, who are these guys that are going to stand up and put back-to-back performances together? And that's, you know, consistency is key in this game. You know, just if they beat Armagh, they'll probably top the group. Makes them a much easier quarter-final result for them. If they don't, they could be up against it going to Derry in the last game. So it's one of those. It's a huge game, and they will have to get another big performance to beat Armagh, I think.
I was sitting with my Armagh hat on, and you're wondering, is this a good thing or a bad thing in terms of the result? The draw might have sat that bit better, but yeah, we'll see. Like, of course, Armagh coming to Dublin, the following that they have. I don't think there is that potential for a flatness back in Dublin again. I think they'll have taken a great spark out of what they went and did themselves. And again, it's not even the experienced players, while them performing to that level is brilliant. I think it's just the confidence that those newer breed, that they've parked Meath, they've all come back, put in a super performance, and then you're coming out here in front of whatever it'll be, 50, 60,000, brings the best out of everyone.
But also then on the flip side of that, Armagh, where are they at as like they're All-Ireland champions? They've got to another Ulster final, lost again on penalty, or again in extra time, you know, drawing the full-time result. But like that for a squad, how much energy is that going to sap out of them? And then having to get themselves right back up to play Dublin, who, you know, have been there kind of thorn in their side over this last while. So, and in Croke Park, which is going to make it a bigger kind of atmosphere and a bigger occasion, I suppose. Where are their squad at, like?
I suppose the big one is, like, last year was extremely deflating. The Donegal one going to penalties, you sort of felt, geez, there's just no comeback here. And to be fair, history shows that they picked themselves up. So as bad as this one was again, that it went extra time, thankfully it didn't go to penalties. And there was, you could see the players were distraught again. You could see that, you know, it really took a lot out of them. They've won their All-Ireland. They wanted to back it up with more silverware. It didn't happen. But I do think, particularly what happened last year, and it's been so fresh in the mind, they'll be able to park that there. Now, the difference is the last 2 years, they had Westmeath at home. And with all due respect to Westmeath, they sort of knew they could stumble across the lane, where if I'm an Armagh player now, I'm wondering, what have Derry done since that Donegal game? There's plenty of talk about how well they're going in challenge games. Personnel starting to go back to full fitness. So they're certainly going to face much stiffer opposition the first day out. But I obviously think they have the experience, they have the quality to deal with that there. And I think any result at all, they'll be happy with, and then it sets them up with that opportunity to prepare and come. You said the big one for me was the big occasion. If you're playing in an All-Ireland, you're winning it, there's an awful buzz that comes with those big games. So I think it'll be a great one for them to look forward to, and I think it'll be another cracking weekend of football. So
the group of death, we've just been speaking about it there. There's 3 huge games in this group. But what's the importance of getting to the quarterfinals straight up? Rather, you know, you'll have that 2 or 3 week gap. Maybe squads get knocks along the way, or whatever it is, or even to work on some tactics coming into a knockout quarterfinal. How big is that for the squad? It's
massive, because like this is a really trying time for squads at the moment, because they're big games and they're coming week on week. I suppose psychologically, the Galway position, this is a tough one this week, because you haven't performed. You get clipped by a point at the end. But if I'm in their shoes, you won another game this weekend, and they're now having to sit for 2 weeks, and they're watching their rivals now going at it again. That builds a bit of an anxiety within a group, because you just want to get going again. So it sets it up nicely for Armagh Derry this weekend. As you'd mentioned, there's plenty of talk about how well Derry are now going. Armagh were in a bit of a downer, obviously last week, but I think players are fairly good at parking and being able to park that there now and raise themselves back up again. So it's an extremely difficult group to come out of, but because of the week-on-week nature of it, everybody is desperate to give themselves that breather. It's only 1 week. It's a weekend off. It's a weekend that you're probably going to end up spending in a camp, but it's more video and reviewing, post-game analysis, previewing your next game. It doesn't have the same intensity as that extra game where you have to cram in some video analysis, cram in some review and head away off the ground, maybe somewhere that you haven't been used to. So it's massive. It eases the burden mentally, probably more so even than physically on players. And like I said, that Dublin win has absolutely thrown it wide open. And a packed Athletic Grounds this weekend. Like if Derry can find any of that form that we clearly know that they have it in them. Whether it's injuries or whether it is, the knock-on effect of Rory Gallagher leaving them, which they seem to be finding it very hard to shake. There's huge quality and huge experience in that there group. And look how wisely Dublin used that time off from the Meath game. Derry have it even longer to plot, plan, build, watch the Ulster final and pick holes. So it's an interesting one. And I think this group, as it has done this past year, particularly with Armagh and Galway, that's the last game again. There's huge permutations going to come off the end of that, but I suppose the pair of us and how this group will finish out, I think a number of weeks back we had tipped Galway to be All-Ireland champions. I'm not sure, they're up against it now, but I'm not sure.
No, look, obviously Dublin now have the upper hand, but if I could see Derry, could they revive what they had 2 or 3 years ago? Could they revive? Because we see the players that they have. They haven't lost a whole pile. They've lost, okay, McKaig is gone, maybe 1 or 2 others, but there's still the nucleus of that team are still there, and they've been underperforming, let's be honest with ourselves, like they have been in the Ulster Championship, and they've had that now long break to watch, as you say, watch all their rivals still playing football in the summer amongst big crowds and stuff like that. So I could see something maybe coming down the road on Saturday here, and hopefully there is a big performance in Derry, because if they don't and they get blown away, I think they could be the whipping boys of this group. That's what could happen, so hopefully they can revive their season, similar to what Dublin did there Saturday. Like if they went down to Galway and got a whipping, I couldn't see that Dublin side going, beating Armagh the following day out. So just hope and pray that we get a good game out of it.
Yeah, no doubt we will. I suppose, Diarmuid, the biggest shock to come out of last weekend was obviously the Mayo defeat at home to Cavan. I'm not even sure Cavan people seen this one coming. I suppose given the key personnel that they were missing in Garrod McKernan and James Smith around the middle of the field, and then obviously Paddy Lynch still only finding his way back. But an incredible turnaround from them to be, obviously the performance that they had against Tyrone led into, I suppose, the lack of confidence going into it, I suppose, from a general public. But to be 3 points down at half time, away from home, and to turn it around and hit 113 in the second half, and to be so commanding, is that a reflection on how well Cavan played, or is that a flatness in Mayo from the haze of the Connacht final in a packed stadium? They went back to nearly the same sort of performance that we seen maybe away from home against Leitrim. They just couldn't seem, whenever they went behind, that was when they started the second half, there was just no spark in them at all, which was really unusual after that Connacht final. Yeah,
for me, it's this mental frailty with Mayo, and it's there all the time. I think, look, they performed, we did see a very good performance in the Connacht final against most likely the All-Ireland favourites coming into this year, Galway. They had a great game. I think there was a couple of points in the end. But then again, Mayo, I think they just took the eye off the ball. They took them for granted. Cavan coming up the road, we'll get through this one, sort of thing. I think that was their mindset going into it, and you could see the way they performed. Cavan came up and just ran all over them. They literally ran all over them. As you said, they were down at half time, but Cavan's revival in the second half. And to be honest with you, Mayo were kind of out on their feet. They got a goal, Aidan O'Shea got a goal at the end to kind of make it look like a respectable scoreline. But I mean, Cavan were full value for the win, and at home, in front of your own crowd, first round of the championship. Let's have a reaction of that Connacht final. We didn't see it. And I think Kevin McStay has to really dig deep now, because they've 2 tough games coming up, and I don't see where they're going to get points. Yes, they may beat Tyrone, but they have to go to Omagh and do that, and I do not see them beating a Donegal side who are probably playing the best football at the moment in the championship.
The big thing about them is history tells you there is a big performance in them, and we've seen the Galway game, but it's the psychological damage that home defeat last weekend, and now knowing, again, similar to we talked about Galway, they're sitting now for 2 weeks. They're watching the big game this weekend is Donegal and Tyrone in Ballybuffet. They're sitting having to watch that there, knowing how poorly they underperformed, and I agree with you. They have left themselves an absolute mountain to try and even make it a preliminary quarterfinal at this stage, let alone straight to the quarterfinal. It's gone. There's no point in saying otherwise. But it leads into this weekend. You're talking about the big one up north is Donegal Tyrone. Donegal Ulster champions again. Obviously Tyrone put in probably not a 9 out of 10, but probably 7, 8 out of 10 performance against Armagh. They just about hung in there throughout, even though I felt Armagh played the better football on the day, but they had themselves in a winning position late on, and that will disappoint them that they didn't see it out. But they do have a hell of a lot more in them in terms of, particularly up front. McCurry carried the bulk of the scoring board, and we know Jimmy McGuinness, we know Donegal. They're well able to clamp down on one player. They're going to have more options from different angles and areas of the field this Saturday evening.
100%, yeah. I 100% agree with you there. I think this is the game of the weekend. But just coming back to Cavan there, I still think Cavan might not win a game out of that group, so they're like, that'll bring Mayo back into it. Is all they have to do is get one result against maybe a Tyrone on the road, and that'll bring them right back into that group. But Donegal for me have been the form team. Jim McGuinness with all his tactical nuances. I know Michael Murphy got man of the match in the All-Ireland final, and we're going to speak a small bit about him later. But what has his impact on the squad been? What like a guy coming back after retiring, coming back 2 years later to a kind of a new squad, his old manager there, his club mate. What would be his mindset now coming into this game on Saturday?
To be fair to Michael, he seems like he's just extremely focused at all times, and I like, there's no doubt he would have thought long and hard about coming back. Not only because once you're out of that bubble, you're out of it.
Yeah.
Life moves on, things change. Even the personnel that's involved in the squad change. There's a lot of people who would have been his close friends. They have all moved on as well. Colin McFadden, Neil McGee, I know they're involved as selectors, but they're not players. Carl Lacey, these boys he would have been soldiering with. So he was fairly clear in his head that he was coming back to make a difference, and he's coming back to play. And I think it's safe to say the shape he got himself into, you know, he's in incredible shape. He's as lean as he's been for years. But I certainly think the new rules have lent to allowing him be Michael Murphy more. I think whenever he finished up, it was the old game where Brendan Rodgers was running him from one end of the field to the other, and he was being selfless. He was doing what he had to do for the team, and he was tracking him back. But that's not his game. That's not where he's best for Donegal. So I think as the weeks go on, we're starting to see a pattern in terms of how they're using him better as a target man, and others are starting to feed off him. And people are just finding it so hard to handle him, because the earlier you get the ball to him, just given his physical size and obviously his skill set in terms of being able to kick off either foot, it's still not getting the amount of ball that I think they should be putting to him. But you can just see it building week on week. And I think we've seen with Jimmy McGuinness that he always has a bigger plan. Yeah. He's always looking further down the track, and he's not interested in showing his full hand early on. So to me, that's the big thing about Michael, is he's come in, he's understood, where are we at, Jimmy? What can I bring to the table? And the more the weeks goes on, the more we're just starting to see him at his best. And that is a problem for everybody else, because he's so mentally tough, he's so resilient, but he has the skill set to play it any way you want, which is a dangerous animal to train curb. Your own thoughts in the provincial campaigns, and then I suppose your provincial finals. Did you find yourself more engaged now this year? Did you find that there was more excitement around them, particularly the provincial final days?
Yeah, well, starting off, I suppose, with Munster, we all tipped Kerry to win the All-Ireland, or to win Munster. They got a little bit of a scare against Cork, and they pretty much ran away with it then after that. For me, in Connacht, Galway were the form team coming into it. They got a bit of a scare against Mayo too. Mayo ran them very close, got over the line, and you know, that was pretty helpful. For me, Leinster this year was the big one. Usually I'd come down here to Croke Park watching Dublin play in a Leinster final. There might be 30,000 people here, but it was literally like an All-Ireland final day of green and red coming down Jones's Road, Clonliffe Road there. And we had left just after the final whistle. We seen them lift the cup, and we were walking out, and it was a sea of green coming down Clonliffe Road. It was literally like an All-Ireland final. It reminded me of Leinster finals when Dublin were really competing against Kildare and Meath. Like, the atmosphere inside in Croke Park was electric, and it came right down to the wire. They got a 2-point free right at the end to win the thing, and it was epic for Jerry Brennan, a club mate of mine. It was brilliant to see, but the work has been done in the background. You can see that where they're going. Like, Louth have They were in the minor final this year. They're in the under-20 final against Tyrone. They won Leinster this year again. So they're coming. They're building. You know, they're a small county now. They haven't got a whole pile of clubs down there, but what they do have is massive heart, and they're a full footballing county. There's not a lot of hurling there. There's a small bit of soccer in pockets of Louth, but it is a massive GAA county, and for them to beat me, they're massive rivals. For me, that's what the sport is about. You know, it's about the underdog winning on the big day, and for Louth to do that this year was huge. Ulster, we come back to obviously the most competitive championship in Ireland at the minute, and have been for the last 20 years. Every team nearly can win that championship. We seen the Cavan going to Mayo last weekend, taking a result. But from your point of view, I suppose you'll know more about this. What sort of impact is it going to have Armagh being beaten again in an Ulster final? What sort of impact is that going to have on their squad? But then Donegal, like, they've been building this last 3 or 4 years. Obviously Jim McGuinness coming in there. Where do we see their ambitions? Obviously Ulster final was number one priority on the list, and is it getting here in September and picking up the big one then for them?
Yeah, to be fair to Donegal, I suppose that was the big one that I was at myself. I never got to the Leinster final. Similar to what you explained, the Leinster final, just the atmosphere. Obviously the weather lends and adds the stuff, but the atmosphere in Clonus that day, it's something that everyone should come and savour. Just unbelievable buzz as you walk through the whole town and lead up to St. Chernock's Park. Unfortunately, not the result that Armagh wanted, but I just thought as a spectacle, in terms of the level of excitement and a day out, it was incredible, and probably in line with anything else that you've seen. I can't remember in living memory the amount of times where I've been sitting watching games and you're on the edge of the seat and you can feel your heart rate going up, and it's got nothing to do with you. You're not invested in it at all, but you're just seeing tight contests, you're seeing unbelievable skill level, physicality, everything that I suppose you wanted in new rules or an enhanced version of what we had. But the Ulster final had that in spades. But you're right, for me, the Leinster final was just unbelievable to sit. We were coming back from Sligo was playing Tipperary that day, and you're listening to it on the radio, and I couldn't wait to get back home to watch it back, because you could feel the atmosphere even coming through the radio. And as you mentioned, the crowd that went to it, the parade before game, that is all Ireland standard, what was going on. And I think it's huge. It's huge for football in general, but it's huge for Leinster football, because the reality is, I'd say if you honestly sat down and you had Louth and Meath competing, a kick of the ball come between them, and I do think those Meath players will definitely win a Leinster title. This year was just a year too soon for them, but I have no doubt your Westmeaths and Kildares now see themselves as being really close and having the opportunity. They would believe they get to go out Louth and Kildare on any given day. So I think as a whole it's absolutely massive. In terms of where it leads now into All Ireland level, that Leinster Championship, you have Meath and Louth and Dublin obviously going on to Sam Maguire. The rest of the teams are still competing at Talton Cup. I think, I suppose you're talking about that Mayo and Cavan result, them going away. You also seen Down going away to Ennis and putting up a huge score against Clare, which was a big shock to me, because I know the quality there is within that Clare team, and I also know the honesty of effort that they put in on a daily basis, and the level that they've been operating at. It was a huge result for Down to go away and do that there, and I suppose that group in particular that they're in, it blows it wide open, because Monaghan or Down, like, they didn't make a provincial final, but they will see themselves like Monaghan Louth this weekend. It's a massive game. There'll be a bit of, they'll border each other. I wouldn't thought to be that much local rivalry because they're playing in different provinces, but it's certainly one that Louth will need to be tuned in for, you know, and that'll be very difficult to park the euphoria that came with Leinster, because Monaghan are sitting in the long grass now since that Donegal defeat, and they'll see this as a huge opportunity to kick off the All-Ireland series with a win for them. So it's going to lead to a really exciting group there as well also. Diarmuid, Kerry, will not say they're going under the radar, because Kerry don't go under the radar, but they're probably not playing in as high profile games maybe as has gone on in other provinces. They had a huge scare against Cork, a game. I got back home and I was sitting in the house, and like we've seen in so many games, you know, your heart's racing again. There's huge excitement in what's unfolding in games in every province at the minute. But they did enough to get across the line in that game. Obviously, the big one then for me, what they did against Clare and Roscommon, as generally they're favourites, but they went out and they put them game to bed as soon as possible. And that's what Kerry do whenever they're really at themselves. But I suppose the big one for me is in a really, really tight game, they've come up short an awful lot this past 5 or 6 years with this group of players. But if I go back to the Cork game, the thing that stood out for me was, I think the stats was there was 13 Cork shots in extra time and they got 4 points. Kerry had 7 shots and hit 1-4. That's the most pleasing thing if I'm Jack O'Connor or I'm a management group, is that whatever opportunities they created, whenever a game was there to be won, they nailed them and they did what had to be done to get them across the lane. And I think that's the most pleasing one, because there's more of these games that's going to come down the track, and that's the area that come up short. Maybe your own thoughts as someone who come up against them in plenty of big days in relation to that.
We've seen it this year. Kerry didn't outperform everyone in the league. The big one for me was, you know, they were beaten at home a couple of times this year, and that's not often you see that happen with a Kerry team. Yeah, we see they have the forwards to do that, what you're talking about, to take them scores. Once the opportunities are there, I believe that Kerry are probably the most potent forward line in the country at the minute. But where they lack is they go asleep sometimes around the middle third and they can get overrun. Like if they're turned over in that quick transition, that's where Kerry are really, really vulnerable. We've seen it against Roscommon at the weekend, their fullback straight through the middle. Should have probably finished the goal, maybe would have brought them back into it a little bit, but you're right, like Clifford gets a ball against Roscommon after 50 minutes, shrugs off 5 or 6 defenders and scores a goal. They can do that, you know, they've players to do that. But where Kerry have faltered over the last 4 or 5 years is that defence, is that really, really, you know, having 3 or 4 guys that are giving you nothing, like you saying, cutting their heads off, making the opposition's best man null and void pretty much, you know. And how you do that is creating players that love to do that. And I don't, Kerry, naturally all of them want to play football, all of them want to get up and be a part of the attack. Do they have them players to do that really, really hard job? As in, you know, from my era, the Mick Fitzsimons, the Rory O'Carrolls, the guys that don't really want the ball. They want to take the ball off you and they want to set us up attacking. Do Kerry have them players? Not so sure about it. But yeah, you're right. Like they're scoring up front. The way they can play football, particularly Paddy Clifford in the half-forward line. We see Sean O'Shea came back there at the weekend. Like them guys, their range of passing, you know, their athletic ability, and then they've got the target inside. Like the 2 Gainies are playing out of their skin at the minute, and you know Clifford, once he has the ball in his hands, he's pretty much unmarkable. We've seen that against Roscommon at the weekend. So yeah, Kerry are motoring nicely, and they probably got a wake-up call against Cork in the Munster Championship. You know, they turned up and they were, you know, ready to go for that one. But Cork, as you said, we had a discussion beforehand. They're going around the country playing a lot of friendlies. They're going around and they're building a good squad. Like they're big men and they can play football too. So maybe it wasn't a foregone conclusion coming in there. We seen it maybe 4 or 5 years ago when Cork pipped them in the Munster final. If you remember. Connolly got a big high ball in for the last score of the game and they beat Kerry, but they learned from that because, as you said, this time they got 1-4 from them 7 opportunities. I remember David Clifford went down in that game in injury time and took a shot on that wasn't on, and they went up the field and got the goal to win it. So they did learn how to manage a game out like they did against Cork when they had to. But my big question mark for Kerry is always, what are they going to give you in defence?
Yeah, time will tell. They have Cork coming up again. Like I said, Cork, they've been on the road this past, 4 or 5 weeks. They've played a lot of big teams from all around the country. That'll be an exciting one to come in a couple of weeks' time. But I suppose Kerry, you're right in terms of that combative nature in that middle third whenever they don't have the ball. It is obviously an area that once Armagh got a run on them last year again, that they struggled to stop that flow and put a bit of control on the game. But they are motoring nicely. I think the new rules absolutely suit the skill set of players that they have in terms of playing through the lanes. And the reason why they're getting so many goals at the moment is, now granted, they haven't met that 11 players back inside the 40-metre arc at the moment, because oppositions haven't set up or haven't done it successfully enough with them. But because they play through the lanes with foot pass and 30-metre foot passes, it just doesn't allow the defence to get back, and that's why they are creating the goal chances that they are. But once Paddy Clifford comes back, we know how key he is. He's combative. He has a huge work rate. He will bring that level of physicality, in terms of tracking people and chasing. But it's his composure, what he sees before the ball even comes in his hand to what's happening with David on the inside lane will be absolutely massive for them. So I do see them been a big player. I have done since I seen how well they started to adapt to the new rules. I think if anybody, it really has brought their key men to the fore this year. And you mentioned Sean O'Shea only come on as a sub that day against Cork. He's back starting now. He's obviously back playing fit again. And I think once you add Paddy into it, they're going to be up here on an All-Ireland quarter-final weekend and in good fettle.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Where Kerry, I think, falter is that the middle third, and they can just go asleep for 5 or 6, 10 minutes, and they can lose their whole shape and train of thought, and that's what Armagh did to them, as you said. Like, they just ran over them it was 5 or 6 plays, but the momentum just changed, and they found it so hard to swing that momentum back. And if you can get after Clifford, if he drops a few balls, if you can get in his face, I think they're just a different team, But we'll see later on in the summer what sort of. I don't think they've been tested to their full ability yet, and I think that'll happen out here.